All right, coming to you live from the Gorehounds Playground Ladies Room. This is a podcast. I'm Gavin.
And I'm Koby, guys.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate you guys listening to us. A podcast coming from the women's restroom is pretty interesting, but it's all right because actually before I came here today, I decided that I was going to identify as a female, so there's absolutely nothing wrong with me being in the women's restroom. And when I'm done with the podcast later today, I'm actually going to go identify as a senior citizen and cash in my social security check, so everything's all in good place.
All right, now's the time to do it, because if you wait till you're actually one, there won't be any left.
Exactly, that's exactly my point, man. You got to get it in before it's all gone.
Okay, so I think, what are we doing here? This is a podcast. This is our episode 0.
Mm-hmm.
You and I just met each other, what, a week and a half ago?
Yeah, it was a week and a half ago, man. I saw you renting a big stack of films, and we just started talking about them. I think you were renting some Dario Argento and Lucio Fulci films, getting into the Italian horror, and I put in some recommendations, and we just started talking about films even outside the horror genre, which was pretty nice too, because although the horror genre is super fun to delve into, I mean, there's just so many great classic films out there to really just talk about, and films that I personally believe deserve a lot of acknowledgement. So throughout this podcast, really what we want to do is just not limit ourselves to any one genre. You know, if there's any film that resonates within us and if it's something that's worth talking about, something that really speaks to us and something that we just want to let other people know about, then, you know, no subject is too taboo, no movie is too taboo. It'll be on this podcast.
Yeah, and I think that's the spirit of what we're going for here, because, I mean, as two guys who are just kind of meeting each other, but we have, like, kindred interests in the same medium, and I think we're really enjoying just being able to talk about things that, you know, most people don't really get into this art form as much as we do. We want to kind of bond over individual, but also collective interest in film.
Absolutely, it's like collective interest in film, but like, you know, two people seeing one particular film through two different lenses, and you know, with the political climate as tense as it is today, I think it's really
okay. Yeah, so we're talking about mutual bonding over film, and talking about similar interests, and speaking of which, we came today with a film to talk about. It was my recommendation, and I think our plan going forward is to kind of trade off recommendations, talk about movies that we feel like aren't getting enough discussion, which kind of is a little bit ironic, because I think this film that we're talking about today is one that I've certainly seen a lot of people talking about in the last year, which is bizarre.
Well, it's like you said that you think it's like a film that, like, our generation specifically is just finally starting to, like, rediscover, and it's just like rediscovering just any beautiful work of art. You know, once you find something that you love and enjoy, and it's something that resonates within you, you just want to just share it with the world. You know. And honestly, and it brings like a sense of hope to the whole cinematic medium, because for people out there that are just really disappointed with Hollywood and the superheroes and the sequels and just all the crap that comes out of the West Coast, I mean, like, there's really, you don't even have to bother with that stuff anymore, because there are archives and vaults of just some of the most obscure, wacky, and entertaining films out there. You just need to go through the vaults and sift through a whole lot of crap to find those gems, and that's what our goal here is with this podcast, is to find those gems and just share them with the world. So
without further ado, this week's recommendation that we're going to be discussing about is The Holy Mountain. And speaking about, you know, art versus just pure entertainment, while I'm entertained by this movie, and I think it has a lot to offer just visually and just creatively, it certainly transcends just being a movie and has a real artistic core and a message that you could tell that there was an artist behind it who had something that he wanted to say.
And an artist, and that's the interesting thing about Jodorowsky, is that he speaks to his audience through the film media almost exclusively in metaphors and symbolism. So breaking down these metaphors, although they are subjective and there's a billion different ways they can be interpreted. That's kind of what I guess we were going to get into with this podcast today. It's just, breaking down the allegories, the metaphors, and how it spoke to us, And the way it spoke to us, may be different than the way, you see the film. But that's the great thing about art, is that it's so subjective to so many different ways of interpretation. And I think the way people interpret art has to do with like life experience and the things that they've researched and the things that they've indulged in their life and their core belief systems and the ideologies that resonate within them will automatically come out as a reflection in the way they interpret art. So everybody is going to internalize these things slightly differently, which is really, in a sense, what makes The Holy Mountain, I think, just a timeless film. Because I think that not only can everybody extrapolate something different from it, but even in the few times that I've watched it now, I've already noticed different things, different metaphors, different allegories that leave me continuing to question, what he was trying to get across while making this movie. And it's a film that like you can just constantly just explore, just endlessly, and always come up with different ideas of what the overall message of it was.
Yeah, and to me that's like a good film right there. It's one that you can watch and continue to glean more and more out of, and that merits and in fact needs a second or third viewing. Mm-hmm. And specifically, what I've really enjoyed is like having a movie that you enjoy watching and then you set it down and come back to it 5 years later and recognizing that your experience with it is totally different.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Because I think part of the subjective lens of film is just that our own experience tends to change with time, depending on the mindset that you're in when you watch it, your life experience, what's going on in your life at the time.
No, absolutely. One example of that would be that second Texas Chainsaw Massacre with Dennis Hopper. When I first saw that movie, I must have been like 16 years old, and I loved the first one, and I saw the second one, and I was just like, this is so wacky and goofy. But I guess as I got older, I just got more of an appreciation for that schlocky, just really goofy horror type stuff. So now I mean the second Chainsaw Massacre with Dennis Hopper is one of my favorites. So but it's another testament to that. Yeah, just as we get older too. Yeah. You learn to appreciate different things within films and in all art forms. I know music is definitely like that for me too, and especially when you want to talk about timeless work. There's one band that sticks out to me in particular is the Mars Volta. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them. They're a progressive rock band out of El Paso, Texas, and they just create these just enormous soundscapes. Within their records. Like I think they said in interviews that one song actually has anywhere from 200 to 300 tracks per song, which is interesting because literally every single time you listen to it, if I listen to it on my headphones, the headphones will have an EQ and I'll pick up on different noises and stuff like that because the way he puts the music together, this guy Omar Rodriguez Lopez, he puts the music together almost just like a collage of just like different sounds and just eerie little elements that he just kind of just puts together in the computer and different takes from different musicians, and it's just like a big collage, just like a cacophony, a wall of sound. And whether I'm listening to it on my headphones are EQ'd to a certain frequency, so I'll hear different things when I listen to it on my headphones. If I listen to it on Spotify, that has a different frequency too, so I'll hear different things. If I listen to it in the stereo in my car, that has a different EQ setup with the radio in my car, so that I'll always extrapolate just different noises and hearing different things that they went into the overall production of those, specifically the first two Mars Volta records. One is Delau's Natomatorium and the other is Francis the Mute. If you guys haven't checked them out, they're the greatest progressive rock band on the planet right now.
All right, Mars Volta, check them out. But I guess speaking of production that has so many different ideas plugged into it.
Yeah.
Holy Mountain. So I believe that you mentioned it was Jodorowsky. So directed by Alejandro Jodorowsky.
Yep.
He's a French-Chilean director. This is a film came out, I believe, in 1973. Mm-hmm. It was his third feature, although the second one that I think had any sort of acclaim. His first film, Pondo Elise, I believe, wasn't as well known. He in 1970 came out with El Topo, which was kind of like put forward by John Lennon and Yoko Ono, and it was the original Midnight movie.
No, definitely.
You watched earlier this week.
You know what? And I actually just found out that naked boy who's riding with on horseback, that was actually his son.
Yeah, and if you keep watching his films, he as an adult comes back and is in acts in a number of his later films. Dude. So super cool. And I actually coming back again, scatterbrain conversation away from the Holy Mountain. His name's Brontis Hodorowski.
Yeah, it's his son. Yeah. I actually watched half of that documentary you left me, so I didn't finish it yet. But it was so far the most disappointing documentary I've ever watched.
Really? So we're talking about Hodorowski's Dune, the documentary on his version of Dune that he never completed.
Well, it was just so disappointing because when you look at the talent that he got, and really just like the community organizing that he did, and how he was just basically traveling all over the world, getting just some of the most profound, prolific, and notorious artists out there, and just kind of creating what he called was his team of warriors to make one of the greatest science fiction movies ever made. I mean, he had Pink Floyd on board to do the soundtrack for the movie. He had H.R. Geiger, sorry. Who else did he have? He had a bunch of sci-fi artists. He wanted to get the guy from 2001, but apparently he was just a completely pretentious dick, and Hodorowski was like, I'm not working with this guy, so he found somebody else that was...
he had Salvador Dali.
Yeah. So he had Salvador Dali that was going to be playing the Mad Emperor of the Universe, and the only way that they actually got Salvador Dali on board to even do this movie in the first place was if he was going to be the first actor to become the $100,000 per hour actor in Hollywood. And because he only had 3 to 5 minutes in the film, the producers were like, okay, but it's funny. I think it was Salvador Dali's muse in the documentary was even talking about how there might have been a bit of a rivalry between those two because they were both very high-profile artists, kind of leading the surrealist movement in the 70s, and it was a bit of a competition.
And Hodorowski had such a vision and was so uncompromising. And you can imagine that any artist who has a vision, they probably have a hard time getting along, trying to have their visions come together in synchronization.
Oh no, definitely, yeah. And there's one thing that stuck out in that documentary was that in order to have profound creativity, you need to have a little bit of madness in there. And really, this ensemble of artists that Hodorowski got together to make what was potentially going to be the greatest science fiction epic ever made, it was almost just like too much madness, and that's probably what led to the ultimate decline and just the non-completion of the overall film. That's something we can get to in a later podcast, but since we are sitting with a 45-minute block here, let's try and break down the Holy Mountain.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to quickly say why I recommended this, and to me, I love and appreciate all forms of art and love engaging with it. I love sitting down and instead of just looking at a painting, just really sitting down and try to tear apart. What does it say? What does it mean? What do the artists want me to feel? What do I feel regardless of what the artist wanted me to feel? And just really tear things apart. And I think for me, why I love movies is they seem to be this perfect marriage of visual and audio and narrative art, and they can express ideas and messages in ways that words fail to. And
no, absolutely, because it's just like you said, you're just combining just like pretty much all the senses other than smell into one medium, basically, and that gives you like I guess 4 vehicles right there just to relate your message and what you're trying to say through the film. I mean, for me, film, the way I see it is, it's ultimately just the grandest scale of storytelling that we have in society. When you can tell a story through music. You can tell a story through a book, but nothing is going to be as big of as grand of a scale in storytelling as you get through a film.
Yeah, so, it engages with the viewer in a very empirical, experiential way. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can't get as in depth into the narrative as like books can, mm-hmm. but because it engages with you on a mental level and on an emotional level, on a visual level, on an audio level, it just fully wraps you in for that, whatever it is, an hour, 3-hour long block of time.
Well, man, even on a physical level too, man, when you go to some of these movie theaters now, you see the sound systems that they have set up, and just like that movie we saw the other night, Climax, man, you can hear a lot of like that house techno stuff. The way a lot of that music is produced is that they operate on such low frequencies with the drum and the bass that there's a lot of elements to that music that you literally can't even hear, but you can feel them through sonic vibrations. So even like the sense of touch is something that can be felt through a film too, which is very interesting. But
yeah, and so I chose this movie because it has a message. It has about 150 messages every scene, but it overarching message really is something that resonated with me upon my first viewing more than I think any movie ever has. I remember when I watched this, I think last summer, and I was just sitting in my dark basement watching this movie, just thinking, what the hell am I watching? Just from the very opening scene. And I'm not a very religious person. I'm not offended by most things, and I just remember feeling just so violated by this film.
Oh, with the Gregorian chants and the two girls that I guess I didn't even know this. You're the one that told me this. He pulled them off the streets, these two actresses in the beginning, and the alchemist just starts shaving their heads with these creepy Gregorian chant sounds. Yeah, this film grabs you by the balls
from scene one,
from the opening shot. Yeah.
And then it doesn't let go because the second you get accustomed to that scene, it starts switching it up again. Yeah. And it's just one of those movies that just is constantly putting something new on the screen. Mm-hmm. And the second you feel like you're starting to get an idea of what he's saying, he just keeps throwing more and more at you.
More and more at you, yeah. So this is definitely one of those films that if you want to break it down, it demands at least like 10 or 12 viewings to really just like extract everything that you want out of the film and to get into all the allegories and metaphors put in. A lot of which I personally think are extremely sacrilegious, but we can get into that.
I don't even know if that's an opinion. I think that might be an objective fact.
It probably is. I mean, the only reason I say it's an opinion is because I haven't heard it from Jodorowsky himself. But I mean, but yeah, no, it's pretty in your face.
Yeah,
but
we talked about you and I have talked about when watching films. If something is trying to be in your face, trying to make you uncomfortable, I have expressed that for me that works when it's in service of a message.
No, definitely.
I am not a huge fan of films that are just horror and gore for the sake of itself. That are just
Well, yeah, we're basically like the only creative elements of the movie is just like, how fucked up can this torture scene be, or how horrific can this death scene be, and that's pretty much where all the creative energy of the film goes into, is just having this, in a sense, just really just obscene, and for the people that like that stuff, cathartic death sequences. But then other than that, there's really no story. You know what I mean? And if it's going back to like what I said before. I mean, like, movies are just this the biggest and grandest scale of storytelling that we have as a civilization. So to kind of dilute that only to just gore for the sake of gore and torture for the sake of torture, if it doesn't have an overall theme and an overall message that they're trying to get across, it's almost like in a way one can argue that it's just like a misuse of the medium. But at the end of the day, we're not here to infringe on anyone's rights to create the art that they want to make. We're just here to just talk films that we like and just give our own interpretation.
And I think certainly, here we are tangenting again, but there's certainly a market for that type of film. And I'm just not that audience. Yeah. But it should be said that anyone who has reservations about this film has heard recommendations or has seen a scene here or there and thinks like it's just wacky for the sake of itself. I can tell you it's not. It's very much has a purpose. And I think actually, despite having a lot of sacrilegious imagery, a lot of violence, a lot of reprehensible behavior and characters, the overall theme and message of the film is, in my opinion, a very warm and very optimistic and positive message for self-growth and self-change, and waking up from this kind of life we live in, and recognizing what's really important to us. And
no, definitely, and it's a message at the end of the film, and we really don't want to give away too many spoilers, but it is an extremely self-empowering message. I feel like at the very end, where not to give away too much, but there was the alchemist gets like a group of 8 or 9 9 travelers to travel to the holy mountain of Lotus Island, where the 9 immortals live, to steal the secrets of immortality.
Yeah, so there's kind of like it's like a Eastern philosophy, almost Buddhist version of the Fellowship of the Ring, where he gets together these 9 people who are all from different planets in the film, and they all are representative of different personality types and different traits that are present in the real world.
Present in the real world, but also like I feel like that these travelers all kind of represented elements that would contribute to the destruction of humanity and civilization as we know it. So I guess if you want, did you want to get into these what is it, 8 or 9 travelers that we had?
I don't know that it's worth
getting into
picking them apart each one at a time. But if there's something that sticks out, feel free. But I think I think for example, you could talk about one of them's called Axon, and I believe he's from Mars, and Mars is this warring planet where he is the chief... Oh, no, excuse me, Neptune.
Yeah, Axon's from Neptune, yeah.
He's the chief of police, and, just
everything this about guy was my favorite.
Yeah, well, the first introduction, he's wearing, bondage-strapped leather, got a giant mohawk, he's carrying, a 15-foot giant rifle.
Yeah.
And
he castrates a young boy.
yeah, cuts off his manhood. Why?
Why? To complete his sanctuary of 1,000 pairs of testicles. Yeah. So I'm just gonna keep saying that throughout the rest of this podcast. I feel powerful when I say that. Testicles.
Well.
Okay. Yeah, right, but we're moving on.
Yeah. So all these different characters are, kind of leaders of their own world, and the film calls them thieves. Like they're exploiting and robbing and taking things that aren't really theirs. And the alchemist gets everyone together.
And he taps into that too, in that he kind of lures them into the holy mountain of Lotus Island as a way of stealing the secrets of immortality.
Absolutely,
So it was almost kind of a manipulative tactic on the alchemist's part, but there was a reason behind it.
Well, and this was something I definitely picked up on our viewing yesterday that I hadn't originally. And the alchemist is the one who gets everyone together, and that's very intentional from Jodorowsky's point. And I think there's a message in there too. He at one point in the film says, the fish worries about its hunger and not about the fisherman. Mm-hmm. And this is a metaphor for saying that the teacher has to seek out its students. The students aren't going to find the teacher. So when you are equipped with a level of knowledge, the impetus is on you to share it. To not just wait for people to come asking for it. If you have knowledge is power, and power should be shared. And so he brings all these people together, and he's got, if we're keeping in line with the fisherman analogy, he throws out this lure that is, oh, you're all thieves. Well, let's go steal something I know you all want. Let's go steal immortality from these. Well,
and I think he was almost alluding to that in that fish hook too. That one scene where he almost when he transcends that massive, almost Washington Monument looking structure on a fish hook, and with almost this spider-like capacity. The way it almost looks like he was climbing up the wall like Spider-Man or something.
Yeah,
it was a pretty great image, but maybe it was it was almost like foreshadowing the
I think so. I think you're absolutely right. Speaking of which, set design. is phenomenal. The locations and the sets and the costumes, just a visual feast.
Dude, absolutely. I mean, like, the first 30 minutes of this film is essentially more or less a silent film. But it won't bother you one bit, because what you are witnessing is just absolutely mesmerizing. And without giving away too much, we got the alchemist, bringing in these two female actresses that he got off the streets, and he starts washing off their makeup, which I guess could be taken as washing off the sense of self and being, being reborn. With these Gregorian chants in the background. There's mummies and next to butterflies. There's the third eye, which a lot of people can I'm sure can extrapolate what it means to be the third eye. I don't know, Gavin, do you have a take on the third eye?
I mean, just broadly speaking, it's seeing reality beyond just what our conventional senses pick up, recognizing that we have a tendency of almost living with blinders on. No, and definitely. we see the world around us just by light and sound, and recognizing that, there's so much more to what constitutes the human experience than just what you see and touch and taste. That it's so much about what you feel and what you can communicate and what you can express with one another and what you can find within yourself.
Definitely, and it's like a way of transcending the three-dimensional world that we live in and evolving into the fourth and fifth dimension, which is, I think, a big part of what this film was really, really about, as these travelers go out to seek enlightenment in the holy mountain of Lotus Island. There's tons of great imagery within the first 30 minutes. You got this thief covered in flies that might represent a plague. There's a lot of plague-like imagery too, between flies and like exploding frogs and stuff like that obviously have some sort of biblical references. And then you have tourists just taking pictures, as if like these tourists were kind of like bringing in the plague, you know what I mean? And then there was what were they? These Catholic militants that were just exploiting these Christ these little Christ monuments basically, and selling them for a profit. And like simultaneously like kicking like deformed midgets on the ground.
I mean, it should be said that like between the costumes and the set design and just the bizarre nature of the format of the film, there's a lot to extrapolate. But as far as like a lot of the metaphors, many of them are pretty obvious, pretty heavy-handed. When you have fat guys in Catholic or in Roman Guard uniforms and a fat Virgin Mary, and they are getting a guy who looks like Jesus drunk so that they can exploit his image and
they're pouring plaster on his face to make a mannequin out of him.
The commercial element of how religion sells an idea rather than expressing the actual foundations of that belief.
And it's funny because that even got me thinking about the cross that I wear close to my heart every single day. You know what I mean? I'm thinking about it and I'm like, well, the people that made this, are they really just trying to promote just like the message of Jesus Christ, just like, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, the spirit of forgiveness, kindness, and human compassion towards one another? Or was it just like some fucking scumbag that says, all right, well, guys believe in this shit, I don't know why, so I'm just going to make these little emblems and try and profit off it, what I mean? So that almost got me thinking, especially within, I guess, the Christian... whether it's Christian or Catholic Church, there are tons of people that go out to exploit people's faith.
I don't think he's just attacking religion here. I think there's an overarching theme of attacking symbol over reality, and how when we live just by, with our blinders on and just see the world around us as we are taught to believe it is, we are easily exploited and easily manipulated. And, whether it's the church, or it's, governments, or it's, I guess toxic people in your lives.
Yeah.
I think his message of the film to take away is to recognize what the actual intrinsic value of something is. And that cross to you might be representative of something significant in your life, but he would say, the cross isn't important, it's the belief that is.
No, definitely. And for me, it to me, like, yeah, the cross that I hold very close to me, it's more than anything, it's really just the symbol of forgiveness, because I've gone through a lot of personal things in my life that I've had a hard time getting over, and I don't want to live with hatred and resentment in my heart for the rest of my life. That's definitely no way to live. But just like that symbol of just forgiveness, building a bridge and moving on. People are going to screw you over for the rest of your life. I mean, that's just kind of the way things are, and that's the way things go. It's a very cutthroat world out there these days. Very competitive too, so you get a lot of people selling each other out. You get people stepping on each other for chances at promotions in the workplace, and whatever the case may be. It's just to not fixate on the people that have done you wrong, but to just feel sorry for them.
Well, yeah, to recognize that comes from a place of blindness, of people who are after the wrong things and are being just as easily manipulated by the world as anyone else. And that's part of, again, why movies are so great, that you can watch a movie like this and see violence and exploitation and manipulation and not have to experience it firsthand, but still be just confronted with it and have to reconcile that, hey, there are certain things that I'm seeing on the screen here that I am guilty of.
Yeah. And,
it's kind of like a safe way of, like I said, confronting these ideas that we see in the world, and it can teach us lessons about the world without having to go through the heartache of experiencing it ourselves.
Yeah.
Or take a spin on it where we can recontextualize this and say, oh, these people are just... they're seeking the wrong thing. And if I'm going to, just become upset and jaded and, buy into the same system of, well, it's just dog eat dog out there. It's all competitive, and you gotta, eat or be eaten. I think, that's exactly what we don't want. That becomes a cyclical...
And that's going to be one of the biggest elements in my mind that will contribute to the destruction of civilization. Once, and they even prophesies that in the Bible, that it's peer turning against peer, father turning against son, mother turning against daughter, and things like that. It's actually some very scary stuff and things that I've seen personally, specifically in the workplace, But at the end of the day, to be able to transcend that and to be able to just carry on with business as usual and do the things like, that you feel right about in your life, and just trying to surround yourself with people that challenge you. You know what I mean? Like, it's funny. I actually had a boss, the Eurocard on Mountain College here in Fort Collins. This guy purposefully avoided people that were his own age, and he hung out. He was a 45-year-old dude that exclusively hung out with like 20-year-old college kids, because 45-year-old dude hanging out with 20-year-old college kids. Of course, he's a big fish in a small pond. Everyone looked up to him and thought he was like the coolest guy ever. But in order to challenge yourself, you have to like surround yourself with people that know things that you don't, and that can question your ideas and make you think about things differently. Otherwise, you're just going to be reading the same chapter of the book of life over and over, and you're never going to get to the end, and you're never going to learn and experience different things. So to be challenged by people in life is just as important as being challenged by film. And The Holy Mountain, for me personally, was one of the most challenging films I had to reconcile with, and really, I've only watched it twice now, but I'm going to watch it at least a couple more times, just to really to extract as much as I can, because this is one of the densest films I've ever seen in my life. And I've never seen a director that speaks almost exclusively in metaphors and allegories like this, which is what makes it just so interesting. Really.
Yeah, and I eat that up. I mean, like I've told you, I think in metaphors. I express things in metaphors. That's the easiest way for me to communicate complex ideas. I constantly feel like language is so limiting.
Yeah.
And so any way that I can find new ways of communicating with people are things I'm all about. And so that's, I think, why art is so great, because it is like a different type of language where we can express something to one another through a medium that is not just guided through the format of language.
No, definitely. And I mean, as far as speaking in metaphors, it's funny because in talking to you, I realized that a lot of your metaphors translate into film. For me, a lot of my metaphors would always translate into music.
Yeah.
And you know, just my personal experiences in playing with different bands over the years and stuff. But that's just, you know, life experiences. We internalize things differently. So my metaphors are going to be more just from a musical background. Yours might be more from film. I feel like the more we do this, I'll probably have more film-like metaphors as well. But yeah, you know, it's just it's really like the metaphors and the fact that they can be interpreted in so many different ways is really what makes this just like a timeless film, and one that me and Gavin here both believe it's definitely worth checking out.
Well, I think speaking of timeless, we were watching it yesterday, and let me see if I can remember what the example was. But, they were talking a lot about how guns are manufactured and sold and marketed towards, you know, the youth and the children, and that it's exploitative and doesn't care about innocence. It's all about the profit of war.
The profit of war. But, you know, the funny... sorry, did I cut you off?
Yeah, there? No, real quick, and you were asking, like, is he attacking the Second Amendment here? And I was like, you know what? In today's context, you could see it that way, but in the context of 1970... I think he was a little bit more broad than that. I think he was just talking about the fact that we have these weapons of death and destruction that we are promoting and profiting off, and allowing ourselves to just tout around like they're toys, and how just diseased that way of thinking is. And like, I'm not anti-gun ownership. I think that I'm for practical, common sense gun ownership. But to say that we should just be blind to it and just turn them into toys and sell them to children and not consider the fact that these are weighty, dangerous tools of death, and that valuing them as though they are not is dangerous. And I think he was, you know, specifically referencing, you know, a culture of war that he saw present in 1970, you know, with the counterculture and I imagine Vietnam and all the conflicts that are going on then. Yeah. But then the level that film has achieved of timelessness by being prophetic about the way things would look in a extreme future.
And and the fact that you can have like your interpretations on what he means about gun ownership in the 70s, and how like as time goes on now in 2019, someone can see it as like, oh, he's attacking the Second Amendment. That's also just another testament to how timeless like this movie actually is, in that like you know this imagery of guns being promoted to children can have one message in 1970, and then all of a sudden in 2019 it can be interpreted in a completely different way, just with the way the political landscape has changed over the years. Yeah, you know, which is super interesting. But like, you know, as far as promoting guns to kids, I mean, there is one irony there that I do want to point out. I've never really seen any kind of advertisement of guns to kids. The only advertisement I've seen of guns, you know, to the youth is through Hollywood films. I mean, you got guys like Sean Penn, you know.
You've never seen toy guns? What? I mean, water guns. I mean,
like a cap gun says a kid's like that, but that's like nothing compared to like Keanu Reeves in the Matrix films, or even Blade. You know, I remember when I first saw Blade, you know, I didn't even know what a MAC-10 was, and at first when I saw the gun in that movie, I thought it was fucking awesome, and I was like, you know what, like I was confused. I didn't know if that gun was actually made up for the film, or if it was a real gun. And I actually, when I was like maybe like 18 years old, and I researched like, what is that gun that Blade had? It's like a handheld machine gun. And I looked it up, and it was a MAC-10. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Obviously, I don't have one. They're super expensive. Yeah. But I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, like, they do have toy guns sold to kids, but I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, like, I don't think what would impact like a child's mind more on the gun would be like a toy gun that they go out and play cops and robbers with, or is it the glorification of guns used in Hollywood cinema? You know what I mean? And it's funny to think that it's because it's these people in Hollywood are the most anti-Second Amendment people that we have out there. But then they're also the ones that consistently promote guns and glorify them through their action films. So I do think it is a little bit hypocritical in a sense.
I don't think from Jodorowsky, because he is by no means a Hollywood director.
No, yeah. not at all.
But no, I think you've made some good points. But the thing is, it goes both ways. Like, I think if we see things black and white, and we are looking to Hollywood to be the source of social discourse. No, that's pretty foolish. If you're looking at those wackos at the West Coast for political advice, I mean, you've got issues. You just have to look at how much money those movies make and think about the fact that at the end of the day, it's all about profit.
Well, and they know that guns sell, so that's why even though they're against guns, they know guns sell, so they put them in all these great action films and they're awesome and stuff. But I mean, put your money where your mouth is. If you're anti-Second Amendment, then take them out of all the action films and see how much money those movies make.
But the fact that they sell is probably something that Jodorowsky is commenting on. The fact that we have a culture where you can sell these, where it is that it is a product that we do sell, and saying that that you're like, oh, there's nothing wrong with just selling kids toy guns. Well, he would say, are you sure? Maybe there is. Like, why are we? And that's, I think he had one of those planets where they condition children to be ready for war in the future. And
against Peru or something.
Yeah, in the example of the film, he's like, oh, we know that we're going to war with Peru in 20 years, so we teach all the children to hate Peruvians, and we teach them to be good at tossing hand grenades and whatever it would be to fight the Peruvians. And so there's an element of that in the world we live in where, maybe we don't know that we're going to fight a certain country in 20 years. I don't know. That kind of depends on how many conspiracies you believe in.
Well,
the fact that we have a culture that is just so accepting of having tools of violence everywhere. Yeah. And, that's a convoluted issue that I am by no means, knowledgeable enough to really get into on a podcast like this. But I think in terms of, like, filmmaking, it definitely is a way that this art form can express an idea that can really make us look at the world we live in and question it. Because I think he would say,
and that's like the final scene of the movie, basically, is what you were alluding to, I think, with that.
Well, speaking of, that might be a good time to get into it. We're about 2.5 minutes left. And the final scene of this movie is where we draw the title of our podcast. So, without spoiling too much, I think we've kind of covered themes, and I'd like everyone to just watch the movie for themselves. But there's a message of not being trapped in the symbol of our reality and to, take a look back at our lives. So, I think we haven't said it yet, but I think we want to go forward calling this podcast Zoom Back Camera. Yep. And if you want better context, watch the movie. Do yourself a favor.
No, definitely. And honestly, we'd love to hear, your guys' comments, opinions, interpretations on the film, because this is something that can be extrapolated, interpreted in so many different ways. I kind of want to show this film to as many people as possible and see what they would take from it, because I really do think that just about everybody is going to take something different. Yeah. It's funny, I talked to Jeff, he's like, dude, I've seen that movie 10 times, I still don't know what the hell it's about.
Well, and I think it should be said, like, right now we don't really have I don't know if we really have a means of commenting other than if this goes up on YouTube, leave your comments below. Yeah. But definitely engage with conversation, find people that like talking about these things, and, I think filmmaking and movies, and the more you watch, the more you learn, but it's a way of engaging with ideas that we maybe wouldn't naturally come into contact with in our day-to-day life.
Definitely. And the thing is that people will interpret this movie in different ways, but that shouldn't discourage you from talking to these people about it. You guys, like, you see me and Gavin here, we might have different skewed interpretations of what some of the symbology in this film may mean. But just for you guys out there, this is what a healthy debate looks like. You know what I mean? People can agree to disagree and still enjoy the time that they spend together just delving into these wonderful films and trying to understand them.
All right. I think that's a great place to leave off. So in our last little bit here, how about a free plug? Like we said at the top of the hour, we're here at Gorehound's Playground. Yeah. We're in the ladies' room right now. This is a little video rental store, Fort Collins, Colorado. If you're in the area, please come check it out. This is the only rental store north of Denver, and I think these brick and mortar environments where people can meet and discuss and talk about a mutual shared interest is something to be supported.
Oh, absolutely, man. This is the only place I have in Fort Collins, man. If this place goes down, I'm leaving Fort Collins. I'm packing up and I'm